Good morning, Journey, and welcome back for another edition of Sabbath School. We are in the fourth quarter of the Sabbath School quarterly, and we are dealing with education. However, it almost feels like we're taking a deviation this week because we've been talking about education this whole time, but then all of a sudden we're not talking about education. This week we're talking about work.
Mm.
And talking about the many sides of work, the positives and negatives of work, how to work, quote, God's way, and how work can affect positively and negatively our spirituality. Did I miss anything with that synopsis there, Jesus?
No, that's essentially, I guess, at the heart of today's lesson is that work is something good, but then work can also be something bad. And so, yeah, I guess we could touch on the good first. Um, you know, on Sunday, the many sides of work, it says that work can give a person a sense of worth, and kind of like this. It's kind of like an identity that was given to us by God. That's kind of what lesson talks about. Like even with Adam and Eve, like he gave them work, and like work was intended to be good, intended to be perfect, intended to bring this identity and worth. And I can definitely see that in my own life, right? Whether it be just doing this Sabbath school, or whether it be like doing work on campus, doing work like videos or whatever, like it definitely does bring a sense of worth, a sense of calling. Yeah, I don't know. What would you have to say about work being positive?
Well, I think that work can be positive, especially when people can do the things that they want to do and they can do the things that they feel suited or gifted to. You know, when they're able to take their talents and their abilities and really put them to work. And see, part of the problem is this whole conversation is skewed. Yeah. Because we can't divorce this from the fact that we live in a late stage capitalist, honestly, dystopian nightmare. I actually think that our current economic system is actually at odds with the will of God and at odds with how the early church operated. Yeah. And with Christ and the way Christ operated. And so I think ideally, so I guess we have to speak with the ideal first. Ideally, and this is kind of like the picture that they paint sometimes, right? That rosy picture they try to paint, especially when they throw in the American dream myth and all that, is oh, you find something you want to do and then you do it and then you make a living doing it and then you contribute that to society, like, so ideally we give back to our communities and we give back to the world by contributing whatever creative thing we do, whatever thing it is we have to contribute, we contribute that, and then we are able to enrich humanity with it. And I think ideally that would be great. Ideally, if we could, do the work that we are suited for, that we're gifted for, that we want to do. Now, I don't necessarily buy in with that, find a job you love and you'll never work another day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you love the job, there's still days where it's work.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
love pastoring, but there are some days where I'm just like, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
drained. I don't have anything, and I'm tired. There are some days that I don't look forward to. But overall, I wouldn't be doing anything else. And overall, I love the job, right? And I love the career and I love the calling. And, I would say that we, to a certain degree, are blessed because we're able to make a little bit doing this thing that we love to do and doing this thing that we feel called to do. Now, speaking realistically, right? There's a problem. Realistically, um, you can't just make a living doing those things that you want to do, that you're gifted for, that you're talented for. A lot of people that's just not possible. And in fact, we're seeing more and more that even if you go to university and even if you get several degrees and put a whole bunch of money and get yourself into debt with loans and all that biz, because again, part of our problematic economic system, that we don't feel like education is a basic right. And yeah, and we've talked about before with the underfunding of public school systems in certain areas and whatnot. I mean, we see it all over the place. Um, Even people with grad degrees and people with advanced degrees that are experts in their fields find themselves working at a Starbucks or waiting tables or doing whatever they can, because quite honestly, you can't survive in this economy um, off of minimum wage, and you can't survive in this economy. You don't have any sort of safety net underneath you to get yourself started. Yeah. And I think could you imagine, man? Could you imagine that if everyone had their basic rights taken care of, like what we could accomplish?
Yeah.
Like if they didn't have to worry about those basic necessities, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they didn't have to worry about those basic things. Like if if not all of our citizenry didn't have to worry about that, could you imagine what we could accomplish? If all of our members like were able to just pursue their dreams and their passions, or if they didn't want to actually work a full-time job but then still have their basic needs taken care of, but then they wanted to devote their time and their work and their life to the church.
So I think that's what the lesson is trying to say, but it's not saying it appropriately.
Well, it
Uh,
can't, because
yeah,
it's tied
yeah,
into the system.
because it's saying like, right, we our needs aren't met, and that's why work becomes a negative, right? Because of sin and fall, and we have this. We get anxious, we get stressed out, we get depressed, we get drained. But then it says that it's weird because the solution is, well, you're drained and you're feeling tired and you're feeling this and that because you haven't learned to work God's way.
Yeah.
And so here's my problem, right? Is how can you work God's way if you are struggling to put food on the table every week? And for the most part, that is a lot of America right now.
Yeah.
And that's like just it's like I don't agree with that part of the lesson where it's telling me work is more than an economic necessity. More man is more than just an employee. And I understand what the lesson is saying, but I don't think whoever wrote this understands like what it's like to have immigrant parents.
Yeah.
And so here's my dilemma. This is my personal dilemma. Maybe you can walk me through this. I have parents who came from Mexico, who met here, and who have provided for their family for years now. Right? They wait. My dad wakes up super early to drive 2 hours to the bay, come back 2 hours in traffic, and it's like, okay, he does that, and they've successfully been able to, you know, a middle class family, I would say, lower end middle class family, but they've been able to do it successfully, and they've sent a child to college, which is me, and this child feels called to serve in ministry, to be a pastor, to work in the community. And them being Christians are like, okay, I understand his calling.
But
But being immigrants who came here for a better life, they're like, dude, what the heck? Like, you're supposed to be the person who helps us now.
yeah.
And so I'm in this dilemma of like calling, right? This is what I feel like God is calling me to, but I cannot provide for my family the way they expected me to.
Hmm.
Right? Because what they expected was me to be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an engineer, be somebody like in a high business company. But instead, I'm a pastor. Like it just doesn't make like for me. That's I don't know necessarily if they feel like that, but that's how I feel
Hmm.
because of the pressures of work. And so this whole concept of I need to learn how to work God's way, like yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
And I think it's a nice sentiment.
Mm,
Oh yes, we can bring Christ with us to work, and we can take learn from his patience and his kindness and his love, and that's great. Cool, right? But you're right. But there's a very real edge here to this, and I think there's some naivete, and I think there's some privilege coming from that perspective, where it's like easy to say if, say, you're married to a nurse, Easy to say that if you got enough money. Easy to say that if you never had to worry about money in your life. Easy to say. Um, Now, money doesn't buy happiness, and I'll be the first to say that you can have a good, long, fulfilling life without money. And the disciples and Jesus were poor and homeless, sure, got that. But we're looking at our context and where most people are at, um, especially since we supposedly live in like a Christian nation. I just find it really interesting that none of those ideals come through of actually caring about the poor and the marginalized and the oppressed. And so I would say that if those were your parents' fears and concerns, they're valid, right?
Mm,
Because like I could see it where putting all this work and everything into getting where you are. That's what, okay. Now it's your turn, but they want you to be able to solvent and be able to provide for yourself and not have to worry about money. And then yeah, after that, like help them out, sure, absolutely. And
mhm.
you'd want to do that. No, you wouldn't want you'd want to do that anyways. So I mean, like, not an issue, right? Um, and I don't actually like how the Sabbath school lesson like spiritualizes and abstracts this because we're talking about a very real, down to earth issue.
Yeah.
And James says in his book in the second chapter, he goes, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but you do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill,' and yet do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead."
Mm,
I think what that's actually saying is we as a society, we as a church, we as people actually kind of need to put our money where our mouth is.
mm,
If we truly care about the poor and the homeless, then we should be seeking to eradicate poverty and homelessness.
yeah.
If we truly care about people, nobody should be missing. I mean, just the amount of food waste that this country has, right?
Yeah.
On the daily.
Mhm.
And the fact that we can't seem to we can't find budget to help people in the middle of a pandemic, yet we can find all of these tax breaks and we can find all these corporate loopholes. We can find all this money for the military. We can find all this money for those things. But when it comes to helping people, they're like, but let's not.
Yeah.
See, I think that the Sabbath school lesson is correct in that at the end of the day, we're dealing with a sin problem. We're
Yeah.
dealing with a greed problem, a human greed problem, which is a sin problem, which is a selfishness problem, which seems to be at the root of all of it, right? But here's my problem is the Sabbath school lesson puts forth the problem, but doesn't actually give any good concrete steps towards a solution.
Yeah.
Work like God does. Okay, but we're not God.
That's true.
Okay. We could be God, we could be Christ like, but we're not Christ.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't like that at all. Right. Like that's not a sufficient answer. That can be part of the answer, and I agree with aspects of it for sure. But what we should also be doing is we should be pushing for universal basic income. We should be pushing for socialized healthcare. We should be pushing for, honestly, especially right now in the midst of everything, mortgage and rent forbearance. We should
Yeah.
be pushing for all of these things, and because as I think that it should be part of the Christian package. But here's the problem: capitalism has gotten so like intertwined and intermingled with Christianity, especially in America. You almost can't unravel them to a certain degree,
Yeah.
because we've taken capitalistic principles and we've applied it to our Christianity. When Jesus was clearly socialist, and I'm just going to say that just straight up, and I like fight me if you want, fine. It's not even a hot take. This is just the gospel truth. Jesus was straight up a socialist. The first will be last, and the last will be first.
Yeah.
When Jesus tells the story about the vineyard workers in the vineyard, everyone got paid the same regardless of how long they worked for. The early church sold all their stuff, held everything in common. They all lived together in a commune, and they gave all their money to help the poor.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's not that near the principles of socialism, I don't know what is.
Mm,
Because it's about the greater good. It's not just about the individual. And I think that there's even room in this society. There's room for democratic socialism. I think there's room for, hey, if you want to make a lot of money and you want extra stuff and you want that really big, really nice TV or yacht or whatever, there's room for that, right? Now, I think that there's no such thing as an ethical billionaire or millionaire, but I mean, that's just me. Um, quite honestly, if you're able to amass that much wealth, I don't think you can do it morally or ethically. Um, hashtag tax the rich. But anyways, here's the thing though, is like there's room for that. We could actually provide for everyone's basic needs and still have that base system where if you want to work more, if you get that good job or whatever, you make more on top of that, and then you can have those extra things. We have space for that. We have room for that. See, I think part of the problem, and we've talked about this before, man, is we always imagine that this is a finite pie, these resources, right? Like money is this finite pie, and you got to get your piece of the pie, and often the expense of somebody else. Get your pie before they get it, or else you won't get any pie.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is the pie is infinite. The pie is infinite. I mean, look at the numbers we're dealing with here, man. Look at the budget. Look at the deficit. Look at our national debt.
Yeah.
It's imaginary. All the numbers are imaginary.
No, yeah.
Like
That's funny.
they
I
don't,
saw,
they don't really exist.
I saw a tweet that said that like the earth is so and so dollars in debt, and someone was like, to who? Mars?
Right, right. No, that's a valid point, right? We're not the debt we owe to Jesus is completely different,
Yeah.
right? Um, yeah, who do we owe that to? How do we collect? Right? Like, how do they collect? Um, they're imaginary. And the thing is that we could take care of the least of these in our society. I mean, I'm talking as a government, as a people, as a country. We could. We choose not to. You know. And then you have voices like Warren and Sanders and some others who are actually like in AOC who are trying to like help working people, right? And you have a problem though is that we have an oligarchy in this country where all of those lawmakers are so removed from this that they don't even know what real life looks like.
Yeah.
They were born with silver spoons in their mouths for the most part, and they're born with silver spoons in their mouths, and they've lived lives of wealth. And they are like, for example, what's her face, Loeffler, who's running in Georgia, is actually like the wealthiest senator, and got even wealthier at the beginning of the pandemic because she dumped a bunch of stocks because she got insider information about the pandemic and sold all of her stocks before that hit.
Mm.
And I'm like, I know this seems like a tangent, and maybe I'm going off on a rant and a soapbox, but my point, I think it all ties in. I agree with the Sabbath school lesson that the ideal is we should all work at the things we love to do, and we should all have meaningful things that we can contribute to society. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone should be able to pursue the things that they want to do. Artists should be able to make art. Singers should be able to sing. Sculptors should be able to sculpt, right? And all that. And not have to worry about where's the next meal coming from. Not have to worry about, am I going to be able to live in this place that I'm living for another month? Especially right now in the middle of a worldwide catastrophe. Um, like I've said before, man, part of the problem with this whole thing is that there are many people that were expecting the apocalypse to make us become ruthless, and they were ready for that. They were ready for the apocalypse to make them hard and ruthless and willing to do anything it takes to survive.
Mm.
But that's not what this apocalypse was asking for. This apocalypse is asking us to be kind,
Yeah.
care about each other. And that's what a lot of them just don't understand. That's what the system just doesn't understand, because the system is like based on faulty Darwinian evolutionary theory, like survival of the fittest. And like basically when you privatize healthcare and you privatize these things, you're basically saying that your only worth in the society is who you know and what connections you have and what kind of job you get.
Yeah.
That's where your worth is.
Yeah. I think you definitely. I think you just hit the what you basically hit the nail on its head. Basically, like that's something that this pandemic has shown clearly. Um, we should not be at work right now,
No.
but the system has failed to provide for its members.
The system
And
has just failed.
yeah, and so I mean, we have to go to work if you know,
Yeah.
it's the only way to basically to keep going. And you take that risk of not only getting code yourself but giving it to other people.
Yeah. And the
uh,
problem is that the people that are out there protesting the masks and fighting the mask and feeling like their liberties and their freedoms are being impinged on by the mask, which, by the way, I just want to say right now, like in front of the world and everyone, that is dumb. I'm just gonna say it. And I don't care what you say about that. That mentality is ludicrous and imbecilic. All right. Like, and so, but those people aren't the essential workers. In fact, they want the essential workers to get back to work, and they don't care if they live or die because they don't want their comforts to be impeded. Um, and so they are, the essential workers are the ones at risk, and the ones are that are, um, that are in trouble and that are in danger. And so I think we have to be mindful of that. Yeah. Um, yeah. And that's the problem, is the system. You're absolutely right. The system is the reason why it's like this. The system is why those people can't call out sick days.
yeah,
People can't go to the doctor because they can't afford to, because their health care isn't good enough.
yeah,
Like, there's a distinct problem with that, you know. Um,
yeah. No, yeah, dude, I feel you completely. Hmm.
um, so I think that at the end of the day, when we're looking at this lesson, I think that the important things to keep in mind is that I believe that I think the work is good and work is important. Yeah, that we should be busy. We should have things to do. I mean, because God created us with that sort of sense. God created us with that idea that we are to take care of this earth and till it and to work it. Like, that's the whole part of the whole part of that's the actual part of the Dominion package, right? That stewardship. So I'm 100% with that. And I'm 100% with the fact that the fall and brokenness and sin has definitely distorted and twisted that. But I think we have to be really careful with, like, because I think this lesson, like, while it makes some good points, it ultimately, I don't think accomplishes what it thinks it's accomplishing.
Yeah,
You know, and I think that until the system either collapses in on itself or is collapsed, or something radically changes and a new system is built and established, we're going to be dealing with this problem. Yeah. Um, anything else you want to throw in on that?
um no, I mean, I think my last thing I'll say, because I mean, you're talking about the system collapsing, and this is something that I heard a lot growing up, and I think is just making sense in my head, right? Like I was, that was like the one thing like we were taught, like Babylon will fall, like America will fall, like this is the last great empire or something like that. Like I remember hearing stuff like that, and I'm thinking about it now. The only reason empires fall is because the systems they have in place failed to meet the basic necessities of its people. Egypt fell because it for 400 years it was holding uh, slaves essentially, right? Rome fell because of what it was doing to its community. America is gonna fall not because of Babylon or sin, which essentially is a system, right? But it's not what we were taught. It's not is gonna fall because of the things that's on TV, or it's gonna fall because of the youth or this and that. It's gonna fall because America has failed to meet the basic necessity of its people, and like that's just barely clicking in my head. Like, oh, that's what it means for America to fall.
And what's funny is that so many people, especially the older generations, will point at the younger generations and say that they are the reason for the downfall of things. But at the end of the day, it's actually the young people who end up saving things. It's actually the young people who end up fixing things. And we have written the largest bill possible to younger generations with the way that the world is right now, because previous generations have so severely abused our natural resources and this planet that it might not be sustainable for life for much longer. And if anything's going to happen before Jesus comes, it is going to be young people that do it. I mean, look at Greta and look at all the people around the world that are doing that very thing with you know, climate change, and with looking at this economic system and exposing it with police brutality, with all of these different things. It's young people at the forefront, as is always the case. And so I actually have a lot of hope for the future, um, in our young people, because I see our young people actually caring about people, our young people being radically inclusive, our young people actually seeking equality and economic and getting rid of economic disparity, right? And actually like bridging gaps. And so if we can hold on long enough, I think we can see some very real positive changes. And then maybe we can reach that ideal for work, you know, that this lesson is talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, but until then we do what we can. And I understand when members are struggling, and I understand what it is to struggle. And we just, you know, we believe that God provides, but then we also believe the church is here to help with that too, you know, in the meanwhile.
No, yeah,
Well,
bro. Good.
all right, Journey. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about this lesson. And next week, looks like we're going to be talking about Sabbath, which is actually a topic I like talking about. And we'll be talking about that, and hopefully tying in this conversation we had today in with that, and hopefully being able to weave in some of the themes of Jubilee and liberation and whatnot along with Sabbath, which I think is proper and right to do. And if you don't like the hot takes from today, that's okay. Reach out to us. Let us know if you agree, disagree. If you want to talk to us about it, by all means, we're here to talk. And um, in the meanwhile, though, remember that God loves you very much. Remember to love each other. And remember that we at Journey SDA love you, and no distance can change that. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.